Welcome to The Explainer. I am so incredibly thrilled to have you here today because, well, we're on a mission to uncover something truly fascinating. We've previously talked about how the Russian language can sound a bit aggressive, how it can sometimes sound beautifully musical, and we've even looked at some slang that just totally breaks your brain. But today we're tackling a language mystery that goes so much deeper. We're going to figure out exactly why the Russian language sounds less like a standard method of communication and way more like a high-stakes, breathless theatrical performance.
Okay, let's dive into this playbill of an agenda. We're escalating from the micro level of sentences all the way to the heavy physical delivery of the language. So we'll hit the question of drama, rebel grammar and word order, the emotional temperature scale, the untranslatable Russian soul, and finally, the intonation of despair.
First up, Act 1, the question of drama, setting the stage.
Let's set the stage by jumping straight into a single word that perfectly encapsulates the sheer existential dread of this culture. The word is Tosca. Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer existential weight of it. I mean, if you look at most other languages, they simply have a word for sad, right? But not Russian. Oh no, Russian completely bypasses sad and goes straight for the human condition stretching into eternity. It is literally a spiritual anguish, a longing with absolutely nothing to actually long for.
When your dictionary casually includes definitions like that, you really just have to stop and ask yourself, why is Russian so incredibly, deeply, profoundly dramatic? And that right there is our central mystery for today's explainer. We're officially moving past those old aggressive or singing stereotypes, and we're looking purely at the theatricality that's built right into the very fabric of how Russian speakers communicate.
All right, let's move on to rebel grammar and word order, Act 1.
This is where we start building our first piece of the puzzle, and we get to see the completely wild, choose-your-own-adventure sentence structures that Russian speakers get to play with. So in English, we're locked into a very strict subject-verb-object rule. If you want to say I love you, you absolutely have to say it in exactly that order. If you scramble it and say you love I, the sentence just breaks. It makes zero sense, right? But in Russian, the word endings actually do all the heavy lifting for the grammar. So this means you can juggle the exact same words in a sentence pretty much however you want, and it's still completely grammatically correct. And the truly brilliant part, scrambling the words completely changes the emotional stakes of what you're saying.
For example, let's look at 3 ways to arrange the exact same words for I love you. The standard way is "Ya tebya lublю," very straightforward. But put the you at the front, "Tebya lublю ya," and suddenly, boom, it's incredibly romantic and poetic. It essentially means, it is you that I love. Or you could put the love at the front for this big dramatic sigh, "Lublю ya tebya," which basically translates to, love you, I do, but there's a catch. So Russian speakers don't just speak in basic sentences, they literally speak in emotional plot twists. You really never know where the emotional punchline is going to land.
Next up, we have the emotional temperature scale, Act 2.
Okay, so we've got the grammar, setting the stage, which naturally brings us to the emotional temperature scale. And this is where the culture just outright rejects the entire concept of just okay. The really crucial point here is that in the West, we absolutely love our mild emotional middle ground. Think about it. If someone asks how you are, you just say, I'm good or fine, and move on. But Russian culture, it demands absolute honesty and extreme depth. I mean, sure, the word normalno exists, but the language is inherently built to ping-pong wildly between pure ecstasy and utter ruin. It's honestly like the language naturally forces you to live in a high-stakes telenovela at all times. Minor things just escalate instantly. If something is good, it isn't just good, it's прекрасно, magnificent. And if something goes wrong, you definitely don't just say, well, that's a bummer, no way. If your coffee order is wrong, it's a koshmar, an absolute nightmare. Miss the bus? Katastrofa, a full-blown catastrophe. You are literally forced to live at the absolute peaks and valleys of human emotion every single day.
Let's zoom out a bit for the untranslatable Russian soul, Act 3.
We're zooming out to the macro level now to talk about Russkaya Dusha, the famous, untranslatable Russian soul. You see, centuries of incredibly intense history, brutally harsh winters, and world-class literature from absolute giants like Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, all of that forged a vocabulary that's meant to carry immense weight. And honestly, this next word brilliantly illustrates the depth we're talking about. Take the word obida. If you look this up in an English dictionary, it lazily translates it as simply insult. But come on, that doesn't even come close. Obita is actually a hyper-specific, soul-crushing microstory. It's that tight-chested feeling of a grievance or a slight caused specifically by a trusted loved one, which you now have to just carry around forever.
I mean, just think about that for a second. That is an entire, complex, emotional arc packed into exactly 3 syllables. When your daily language comes pre-packaged with built-in words for this profound level of emotional baggage, you are absolutely 100% guaranteed to sound dramatically intense.
Which brings us to our final act, the intonation of despair, Act 4.
We've officially reached our climactic finale here. We've covered the words, we've covered the grammar, but the aesthetic just isn't complete without the physical vocal delivery. Russian intonation relies incredibly heavily on this deep resonance and heavy vocal valleys. When a Russian speaker drops their pitch at the end of a sentence, it doesn't just sound like a casual pause. It has total, undeniable finality. Honestly, dropping the tone sounds as permanent and heavy as a judge handing down a life sentence in a courtroom.
Let's actually practice this together with a very simple goodbye. До свидания. Okay? Step 1, sigh heavily. Step 2, just drop your shoulders in total defeat. Step 3, flatten your intonation completely. And step 4, sound entirely final. До свидания. Right? It honestly doesn't sound anything like a breezy, see you later. It sounds like you're watching them board a creaky wooden ship crossing the Atlantic in 1850, and you just know deep down in your heart you will never ever see them again.
And to me, that is the beautiful summary of this entire explainer. This language just flat out refuses to be shallow. It forces you to feel absolutely everything at a level 10. And that is exactly why people fall so deeply in love with Russian, whether they're reading the heavy existential themes of Tolstoy or, they're just at the corner store buying a loaf of bread. Every single moment matters.
So, I want to turn it over to you now to think about this. When a language forces you to feel so deeply, does it actually change how you experience the world? And while you ponder that, what is your absolute favorite deeply dramatic Russian word or phrase that we might have completely missed today? I'd love to know. Thank you so much for learning with me in this explainer. If you enjoyed uncovering these cultural depths, please subscribe so you don't miss our next breakdown. See you next time.